Vietnam, and Clarence Thomas was sworn in as a Supreme Court justice. We'll have the details in our news summary in a moment. Judy Woodruff is in New York tonight. Judy?
On the NewsHour tonight, the Civil Rights Bill battle over quotas and monetary damages for sex discrimination is our lead focus. Then, more testimony about the BCCI bank scandal. Today, former Budget Director Burt Lance tells his side of the story. Next, the 92 presidential election. We have another in a series of interviews with the candidates. Tonight, former California Governor Jerry Brown. And finally, essayist Roger Rosenblatt on what We the People is all about.
Funding for the NewsHour has been provided by AT&T. AT&T connects the world, from equipment to networking, from computers to communications. AT&T, the right choice. And by PepsiCo. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And by the financial support of viewers like you.
All sides in the 13-year civil war in Cambodia signed a peace treaty today. Secretary of State Baker and representatives from more than a dozen other nations also signed the accord at a ceremony in Paris. The treaty foresees a transition to democracy for Cambodia, but Baker said it offered no guarantees. We have a report narrated by Louise Bates of Worldwide Television News.
Tight security guaranteed nothing would mar this ceremony, the result of 4 years of negotiation, compromise and intense international pressure. It's the biggest peace effort launched yet by UN Secretary-General Pérez de Cuéllar and will lead eventually to the country's first free elections. But for Cambodians, the first tangible sign of peace will come next month when Prince Norodom Sihanouk, head of the new National Supreme Council, returns to the presidential palace after an absence of 21 years. But reservations remain about the strongest of the guerrilla factions to share power on the National Supreme Council, the Khmer Rouge.
I don't think anybody can tell you that there will for sure be lasting peace, but there is great hope, and there is reason to believe that we are embarked upon a road for peace.
It's estimated at least 2 million Cambodians have died during 20 years of fighting. The talk of bloodshed was forgotten during the ceremony, attended by leaders from 19 countries, including China. The test lies ahead as the faction leaders retire, for now, a generation of young fighters.
Secretary Baker also said the United States was ready to open talks with Vietnam on normalizing relations. He said they could begin next month, but only if Vietnam continued to cooperate in resolving the MIA issue. There are 2,300 Americans listed as missing in action from the Vietnam War. The United States wants a full accounting of their fate. Judy?
Former hostage Jesse Turner was reunited with his family today. The reunion took place in private at a U.S. Air Force hospital in Wiesbaden, Germany, where Turner is undergoing tests. Afterwards, his wife described their meeting, the first in almost 5 years. She appeared at a news conference with Turner's mother and the daughter he had not met until today.
We told about how much we miss each other, and how I told him how much you missed your daughter's childhood, and we are going to make it up for him, of course, and he needs a vacation for that.
What did he say to Joanne, and what did Joanne say to him?
She said to him, Daddy, in a nice voice, and he said to her, sweetheart.
Jesse Turner's doctors said today he was in basically sound physical condition, though he was weakened from lack of exercise. Israeli Prime Minister Shamir will lead his country's delegation to next week's Middle East Peace Conference. A spokesman for Shamir said Israel had now officially accepted its invitation to the meeting in Madrid, Spain. The statement appeared to signal that Israel accepted the Palestinian delegation named yesterday. Israel had said it would not go to the talks if the delegation had any links to the PLO.
Clarence Thomas is now an Associate Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. It happened today, 2 weeks earlier than expected. The judicial oath was administered at noon by Chief Justice William Rehnquist in the Supreme Court conference room. Thomas was scheduled to be sworn in November 1st, but he asked the Chief Justice to move up the date so his staff could prepare for the court's return from recess on November 4th. A ceremonial swearing in and picture taking will still take place as planned on the 1st.
There was testimony today before a congressional committee that U.S. money to Bolivia, Colombia, and Peru aimed at fighting drug trafficking may be ineffective. The conclusion resulted from reports done by the General Accounting Office and the State Department's Inspector General. The report said there was poor oversight in the three countries, and the State Department said corrupt drug officials had recently been appointed in Bolivia. U.S. anti-drug aid to the three countries amounted to almost $500 million this year. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee continued its hearings into the Bank of Credit and Commerce International today. The witness was Burt Lance, former budget director during the Carter administration and later a consultant to BCCI. Lance said he had no idea the bank was involved with fraud or money laundering. He said he advised the founder of BCCI in 1977 to enter the U.S. banking market.
I told him again and made it very clear to him that if you're going to have a presence, if you're going to be a world bank, if you're going to be a global institution, then obviously you have to have a presence in the U.S., and that's not against the law, and that's to be welcomed. That speaks well for both parties and so on. And my advice to him always was that, you need to go ahead and go through the process of getting regulatory approval for whatever you do and make sure that you do it in direct fashion. And so my approach, I think, is fairly open about my saying that you do it directly, and whatever you do, you make sure you do it properly.
The Federal Reserve Board today issued its latest assessment of the nation's economy. It found most regions weak or growing slowly, with generally sluggish retail sales and industrial output. The report also said business optimism about the future remained guarded and described the outlook for the critical holiday sales season as cautious. Worries about the economy are apparently behind a sharp drop in re-election support for President Bush, according to a new public opinion poll. The survey done for the Washington Post and ABC News was conducted on Monday. It showed 47% of those asked would vote for the president now, compared with 68% in March, just after the end of the Gulf War. White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater shrugged off the results, saying polls go up, polls go down.
And that's it for the news summary tonight. Now it's on to one more debate about a civil rights bill, a BCCI update, a conversation with Jerry Brown, and a few words about democracy. Our lead story tonight is the return of the civil rights debate to the U.S. Senate. It is over a bill that features old arguments about quotas, new ones about sexual harassment. We'll hear from three senators in the center of the debate after this backgrounder by Kwame Holman.
For more than a year now, Democrats in Congress have been pushing their version of a civil rights bill, and President Bush has been pushing against it. The debate on the issue had become fairly well known.
I want to sign a civil rights bill.
This is not a president who wants a civil rights bill.
I know there's another so-called civil rights bill out there, but it's a quota bill.
Well, of course, it's totally incorrect to say it's a quota bill. It outlaws quotas.
The Democrats' bill was aimed at reversing 6 Supreme Court decisions that made it more difficult for workers to sue employers for discrimination. But the White House insisted the bill made it too easy to sue, that employers would simply hire a set number of minorities or a quota in order to avoid litigation.
The bill is crafted right now as a quota bill, and the president has said he will veto that quota bill.
And he did. But undaunted, House Democrats introduced and passed a similar bill this year. It requires that the employer prove that his or her hiring practice is based on the needs and requirements of the business. It allows racial minorities to collect unlimited monetary damages for intentional discrimination, while capping damages for women and other bias victims at $150,000. And to please the president, the bill has language that specifically outlaws the use of hiring quotas.
We say no to guarantees. We say no to quotas. But we say yes to equality, dignity, and opportunity for all.
But President Bush still wasn't convinced. He was outraged.
They wanted a political win. They wanted to grind me into the political dirt. and we have a good record on civil rights, and we have a good history of fair play. And I want a fair, strong anti-discrimination bill that will guarantee workers' rights, women's rights, workplace rights, but will not create quotas.
Hoping to head off a showdown in the Senate, Missouri's John Danforth and other moderate Republicans offered compromise legislation. Their bill retains the unlimited monetary damages for racial discrimination called for in the House bill, but establishes a sliding scale of damages ranging from $50,000 to $300,000, depending on the size of the company, in cases of sex and other discrimination. And to deal with the problem of quotas, the Danforth bill would allow employers to screen out individuals only if the criteria used are job-related and consistent with business necessity. The president accepted that language in a civil rights bill for the disabled he signed last year.
This proposal will not be difficult to criticize. It is, after all, intended to find a consensus that moves the law forward. Finding consensus means that the proposal will meet no one's definition of a pure bill. Moving the law forward means passing legislation. So there's no comfort here for those who want an issue, not a bill.
But the White House rejected Danforth's efforts. Presidential spokesperson Marlin Fitzwater said, "It's a nice try, but it simply does not answer the problem." Ironically, any hope Danforth may have held out for a compromise on civil rights legislation may have been dashed during the recent debate on another highly charged issue, an issue in which he played a major role, the nomination of Clarence Thomas to the U.S. Supreme Court. Allegations brought against Thomas by Professor Anita Hill put new light on the issue of sexual harassment in the workplace. Some senators said Hill's charges opened their eyes to the seriousness and extent of the problem.
The women of this country, I'm certain, owe you a fantastic debt of gratitude for bringing this issue of sexual harassment to the fore. But as one of those 98 men in the United States Senate, I think I speak for all of us, and I say we owe you a debt of gratitude as well for bringing this issue up to the fore in a more striking, more sympathetic, more concerned manner than ever before.
Of course, the state of the law actually is that women, even in these kinds of situations, don't have adequate remedies. All they have is an injunction. They're not permitted to get any damages, which is one of the matters that's being addressed in the Civil Rights Bill.
So now the debate over the Civil Rights Bill is as much about sexual harassment as it is about quotas. In the wake of the Thomas hearings, some senators who had favored the Danforth compromise now say they object to placing caps on damage awards to victims of sexual discrimination. Suddenly, all the hard work, all the fine-tuning and consensus building on civil rights seems about to break apart just as the bill hits the Senate floor.
And with us now are the bill's main sponsor, Senator John Danforth, Republican of Missouri, its chief critic on the quotas issue, Senator Orrin Hatch, Republican of Utah, and a Democrat who wants a change on the caps provision, Senator Tim Wirth of Colorado. They joined us from studios on Capitol Hill. Senator Danforth, where do you stand tonight? Do you have the votes to win this?
Jim, I don't know, and I don't think we will know until the votes are counted. This has been a long, drawn-out fight. We've been at it now for a year and a half, trying to put together legislation which makes nobody completely happy, but which tries to restore the law to where it was before 1989 when the Supreme Court changed it. I think it's good legislation. It's balanced legislation. It's designed to be balanced legislation. And my hope is that everybody will swallow a little something in order to get it passed.
Senator Hatch, why are you and the President and his advisors unwilling to swallow a little something to get this passed?
Well, first of all, the President's bill is a good bill.
No, I'm talking about Senator Danforth's bill.
Well, but keep in mind, the President's bill is a good bill, and he is right that Senator Danforth, although he adopts some of the language, and I have to give Jack a lot of credit for trying very hard here. I tried last year myself and was unable to bring about an effective compromise on this matter. But it's still basically, in the President's eyes, and I have to say in my eyes, a quota bill, because even though the House puts in its bill that nothing can cause quotas in this bill, the effect of the language in the bill will force employers to turn to quotas rather than have to face the astronomical costs of defending themselves in employment discrimination suits. Secondly, there's never been any controversy, as far as I can see, over overruling Patterson versus McLean. Reagan was willing to do it.
What is that, sir?
Well, that was the case that did not allow sexual harassment cases. Everybody's agreed that they should be allowed. I admit that there are some who, that there's a split on whether or not there should be caps on damages. I myself have always been one who has argued against caps on damages.
We'll get to that issue in a moment, specifically more so with Senator Wirth. But Senator Danforth, Senator Hatch has said, again, what President Bush and his folks have been saying from the very beginning, that your compromise bill does, in fact, allow quotas. Now, does it or does it not, from your point of view?
To my way of thinking, that is reminiscent of the old days when people used to say that putting fluoride in the water supply is a communist plot. I think it's an outrageous argument. The administration has put out one document within the last day or so that uses the word quota 4 times in a single sentence. It's a word that inflames the passions, that does not accurately describe the legislation. It can't reasonably be called a quota bill. In fact, the differences now are so narrow that you need a high-powered microscope to see them. I think the real question is whether we can at least have enough flexibility to come together despite very minor differences now. But the differences aren't any longer on the issue of quotas. I think we have long ago put that one to rest.
Senator Hatch, are you and Senator Danforth sitting side by side there talking about the same bill?
Well, I have to tell you that I deal with these all the time as ranking minority leader on the Labor and Human Resources Committee. These are employment discrimination problems. And under the Griggs decision, which Kennedy and all the others said they wanted to return to, there was a flexible standard. Now, although Senator Danforth adopts that flexible standard, he adds to it and narrows it to where it comes down to performance on a job. The average employment discrimination lawsuit today costs, just to defend, small business and big business alike, on an average of $80,000. That's just attorney's fees for the employer. If this bill passes in its current form, either the House bill or the Danforth bill, the cost of defending these cases will rise dramatically, probably double. Some estimate as high as $500,000 per case. Now, if they rise that far, then employers have no alternative other than to hire by the numbers in order to solve their problems. And that's hiring by quota. If they do that, then we are not going to have the same America that we've had before, in the sense of having the right to choose the people who are most qualified to perform the job. You'd have to choose at the lowest common denominator.
Well, clearly I've been unsuccessful in working a compromise on this one. Senator Wirth, let's go to your problems with the Danforth bill, and that is you want the cap removed as it relates to sexual discrimination matters. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, it is. I think 2 things have happened very significantly in a short period of time. One is the administration's clear unwillingness to go along and work out anything. I give Jack Danforth all the credit in the world. I think he's tried mightily, and he was their great champion for Clarence Thomas, and now they're turning right around and going the other direction on this so-called quotas issue. It's pure politics in the nastiest sense in the country. They've said they're going to veto anything, and so I think all bets are off. The second thing that's happened are the dramatic changes that occurred in the country with the hearings related to Judge Thomas and Professor Hill. Americans watched in a fascinated way this whole set of allegations, deeply concerned about it. The topic of conversation in the country was, how are women treated? And in this bill, much as that compromise would be good if we could get a compromise, obviously we can, in this bill, women are treated as second-class citizens, and the question is why?
And you want, explain how they're treated, in your opinion, as second-class citizens.
Well, as a remedy, if a woman is discriminated against in the workplace, and it is found that that's the case, what remedy exists? The remedy that exists for men or for people who are discriminated against on the basis of religion or national origin or race, there is no cap on the damages that they can claim. For women, there is a distinct cap placed on this. Why are women treated? There's only a certain amount of recourse for women, men or others have a much greater recourse. Why is that? That's the problem in the bill.
And you're going to offer an amendment to eliminate that, right?
Senator Mikulski and I will be offering an amendment to eliminate those caps.
All right, Senator Danforth, will you accept that amendment?
No, I think the issue now is whether we can put together a compromise that can get at least 67 senators in favor of it, or in the absence of 67 senators, a majority plus the president. The problem in the country is that people are afraid of lawyers. There was an article in the newspaper last weekend that somebody filed the lawsuit and got $126 million in damages for the loss of an eye. And I think generally the idea, whether it's product liability or whether it's medical malpractice, the idea of capping damages is something that is very widespread now and has a lot of support. This is an effort to balance the concerns of the business community who believe that litigation has gone wild in this country with the need of women to have real remedies. Under current law, as we have it today, a woman who files a sexual harassment case can get reinstated in the job and get back pay. Reinstatement in the job is the last thing that most women want if they've been harassed on the job. What they want is damages. They should be able to get damages. This bill that we have introduced provides, depending on the size of the employer, up to $300,000 in damages for sexual harassment. That is a huge recovery. Very few cases under the old law relating to racial discrimination, which was passed back in 1866. I think only one case has been over $200,000. So really we're talking about symbolism more than anything else. But it is very important to reach a compromise. And what I say is give women what they don't have now, and that is the possibility of damages in these cases, but do so in a way that doesn't make it impossible to pass the bill.
You think, Senator Wirth, you think this issue is important enough to scuttle the bill if that's in fact what happens because of it?
Oh, I think the accusation that my amendment will scuttle the bill is not an accurate one. The president's already said that he's going to veto the bill. The bill is already scuttled from his point of view. He's playing the quotas game and playing the politics game. Now I think we have the opportunity to turn around and try to do the right thing. Now, on Senator Danforth's suggestions about this, one, I would say, why is it that caps are placed on this for women and they aren't placed on it for everybody else? If there's such a concern about caps, why don't we see the authors of the bill then come forward and try to put caps on everything else? They're not trying to do that. Well, secondly, I think it's really unfair to assume that charges brought by women are going to be frivolous ones that somehow are going to cause a whole lot of lawyers to come in. Why are charges that would be brought on discrimination by women frivolous, charges brought by other ones are not?
No, that really is unfair.
Well, I mean,
nobody is suggesting that at all, but I think it is
clear.
Well,
I think, Jack, that they are suggesting
just wait a second. Wait a second.
Point. Just let me finish. You had a chance to do yours, and I would like to have a chance to do mine. I think, third, if there are problems related to trial lawyers and torts and liabilities and so on, let's address those problems straight on. But why should those problems be carried on the backs of one group in our society? If we got a problem on those issues, and they may be very severe, I would agree with you that we ought to address a lot of those issues. But this is not the vehicle on which to do that. I don't think that that's fair either for a large segment of the population.
Senator Danforth?
Well, it's just a total mischaracterization of the situation. I think that there are a lot of people in this country who realize that we have created in America a litigation bonanza. I think it's also clear that when it comes to passing civil rights legislation, this has always been an effort to get a bill passed over the very strong objections of the business community who believe that they are going to be sued for huge, hundreds of millions of dollars in the case of this eye thing, damages. The objective is to get something that is passable. It is, right now, women have no possibility of getting any damages at all. This bill provides up to $300,000 in damages.
Let me ask Senator Hatch, what's your position on the caps on the damages for sexual discrimination and sexual harassment?
Well, behind the scenes, let me just make it clear. Some in both parties have tried to say that this is that now they're going to solve sexual harassment problems. That's always been something that both parties, Reagan and Bush, have been willing to do. So that's
How do you feel about Senator Worth's amendment?
I'm going to get into that.
Right.
With regard to Senator Worth's amendment, I have argued behind the scenes that it is not fair to allow wide open damages in the case of racial matters and not allow them in the case of sexual harassment. If you want to have caps, and I think Senator Danforth makes an excellent case that perhaps caps are justified in today's high litigation climate, then you ought to have caps across the board. You ought to treat everybody equally. There ought to be equal treatment for the racial cases as well as the sexual harassment.
We're making some real progress, Jim. If we
I've always been there. I was there before I think you even thought of this amendment, Senator Worth, because I've argued it behind the scenes for a long time. But Jack Danforth is also very right too. If the Worth-Mikulski amendment does pass, then it will cause the business community to come unglued like you've never seen before, because they don't want a lot of suits that may be frivolous. Again, a litigation bonanza for lawyers. There's so many other provisions in this bill that are a litigation bonanza for lawyers that this would just add another one. So what Senator Danforth is trying to do, George Mitchell and others who have worked on this behind the scenes, is to try to come up with a way of having a civil rights bill that can pass and keep 67 people together.
Let me ask Senator Danforth this. You said a while ago, Senator, that you either have to have 67 senators or you have to have 51 senators and the president. We've talked about the effort to get 67 senators. Where are you in the effort to get the president?
Well, I had a discussion last night with Boyd and Gray, the legal counsel at the White House. I can't say that very much came of it, but my suggestion box is always open. I'm willing to talk to anybody. This has been a year-and-a-half effort. And I guess what I'm saying, Jim, is that I'm not in this job to spin my wheels. I think that the objective should be to legislate and to try to solve problems and not to create very high-sounding philosophical arguments, but that have no practicality of becoming a realistic possibility.
Jim, if I intervene just for briefly there, it seems to me that this is, of course, a high-sounding principle. Orrin Hatch said himself that women ought to be treated the same as men. Now, why we can't build this into the legislation, I do not understand. Finally, I think that the point ought to be made as well when we talk about this being a litigation bonanza. If you look at the history of this, there have been in the last 20 years, an average of 6 cases a year in which major settlements came about. 6 cases a year. Now, that is not a litigation bonanza. That's a rhetorical flourish.
Let me ask Senator Danforth one final question. There was a point that you made, Senator Worth, a moment ago. There was a lot of expectation, Senator Danforth, because of the strong way you supported Clarence Thomas for the Supreme Court nomination, that President Bush would be so grateful that he would say, okay, Danforth, you can have your civil rights bill. What happened?
I never viewed there as being any linkage at all between my support for Clarence Thomas, who is my close friend and has been for 17 years now, and civil rights. If the White House would like to see linkage, I would gladly accept it, but I haven't seen that yet.
Did you expect any, Senator Hatch?
No, as a matter of fact, I didn't, because we have to resolve this. But let me just say something.
One quick thing,
This
please.
is very difficult to resolve, because these problems are real problems. They're important problems. They can't be solved by splitting the difference. And I want to give Senator Danforth a lot of credit. Last year I tried to settle this. I had my head handed back to me. Let me tell you, it's a very, very difficult set of issues. It isn't as simple as the media makes it, and it has to be resolved.
But you're going to vote against his bill, right?
Well, I'm going to try and help him to get it done in a way that can get rid of the quota aspect and also make sense in the rest of the bill.
Gentlemen, thank you all three very much.
Still ahead on the NewsHour, new testimony on the BCCI banking scandal, an interview with Jerry Brown, and some thoughts about We the People. Next, another chapter in the BCCI bank scandal. Today, a Senate Foreign Relations subcommittee heard Burt Lance's part of the story. Lance was President Carter's budget director and was forced from that job due to questions about his own finances. His dealings with BCCI came later when he sold his own Georgia bank to a front man for the Bank of Credit and Commerce International. Charles Krause reports.
Burt Lance was the only witness at today's Senate hearing. He told the committee that his involvement with BCCI began shortly after he was forced out of the Carter administration in 1977. According to Lance, BCCI founder Aga Hassan Abadi hired him as a consultant to help the Pakistani financier acquire an American bank. It was Lance who first introduced Abadi to Robert Altman and to former Defense Secretary Clark Clifford. Lance knew Clifford and Altman because they'd served as his defense lawyers during the Senate hearings in 1977 that probed Lance's personal and business finances and led to his resignation. Today, Lance shed little new light on BCCI's secret ownership of Clifford and Altman's first American bank in Washington, or Lance's own former bank, the National Bank of Georgia. What Lance did offer was some tantalizing testimony about BCCI Chief Abadi's relationship and problems with the Reagan administration and the CIA.
He simply said that he wanted me to be aware of it and not to forget it. What he said was, and I basically am paraphrasing him now, he said, from the precise moment that Ronald Reagan was sworn in as President of the United States, I have been on the CIA watch list. And my every movement, my every act, whatever I do personally as well as through BCCI is noted, watched, observed, under surveillance of the Central Intelligence Agency. Subsequent, beginning in 1984, I would say, I sensed a change in Mr. Abadi, that he no longer had any concerns about visits to the U.S., that he showed no concern about his ability to start banks, if that's the proper term.
Whereas previously he was very nervous about traveling here, isn't that?
He was nervous about traveling here, and he, in effect, as I said, harass is not probably the proper word, but as you well know, there are ways to make people feel welcome or unwelcome, and it was very clear to me that at that point in time in his entry to this country, he was not made to feel welcome. He was put into holding rooms from time to time, that sort of thing that he actually talked about, and I don't know where he was ever searched or anything of that type.
But he never again had occasion to complain to you that that had happened?
No, sir.
Well, the record should show at this point that yesterday Abdur Sakia, on his own, made precisely the same observations that you have and heard the same conversation from Mr. Abadi to the effect that he told Abdur Sakia and other members of the bank that he was concerned about the CIA, concerned about the capacity to travel, and that he was on the watch list, and that just about at the same time you have described, that cloud seemed to be lifted, and he displayed optimism and so forth. So your observations are confirmed, in fact, by somebody who worked with him for 13 years and was a member of the bank. Let me ask you now, you said you wanted to make some personal observations or conclusions, and I wish you would.
I think at some point in time, and if I had to pinpoint a time, I would say in 1984, that I think that there was obviously an overt effort by our intelligence agency to, for lack of a better term, to co-opt Mr. Abadi and BCCI and in effect turn them in to the bank of the CIA.
You on your own drew the conclusion that this relationship had changed, and the conclusion you drew was that there had actually been a co-opting, an overt outreach to Abadi, that he was comfortable, he knew the CIA wasn't going to bug him, that he could kind of move his operations with a certain sense of confidence. Is that accurate?
That is totally and completely accurate, Mr. Chairman. That is my view, and that's the conclusion that I reached as a result of my own experiences.
The CIA is scheduled to testify about its links to BCCI on Friday.
Next tonight, the 1992 campaign for president. We have another in our series of interviews with those on the road to the White House. Our guest tonight is Jerry Brown, the former governor of California and now a candidate for the Democratic nomination. We'll hear from him after this Kwame Holman backgrounder.
Please welcome the next President of the United States, Governor Jerry Brown.
On Monday, Jerry Brown, former governor of California, known as the quintessential political maverick, used a traditional setting to announce his candidacy for president, Independence Hall in Philadelphia.
The leaders of Washington's incumbent party, both Democrats and Republicans, have failed their duty. They've placed their own interest above the national interest. They have allowed themselves to be trapped and in some cases corrupted by the powerful forces of greed. It's time for them to go.
Brown condemned both major political parties, the Washington establishment, and the power of political action committees. He called for limiting the terms of members of Congress and vowed he would accept no campaign contribution larger than $100.
This candidacy rests on a real faith in the people. That's why I won't accept any contribution over $100. If corruption is the problem, then just don't accept it. If political money is the issue, then don't take it.
In announcing his presidential candidacy, Brown chose the same strategy as other Democratic candidates, portraying himself as an outsider working against the political status quo. But in fact, he grew up in a political, staunchly Democratic household. His father, Pat Brown, was governor of California from 1958 to 1966. Jerry Brown spent a good deal of his childhood at political gatherings, here with the family as his father declared his candidacy for California Attorney General. In 1956, the young Brown entered a seminary for Jesuit priests, but later dropped out. Eventually, he graduated from the University of California at Berkeley and from Yale Law School.
And that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties of...
Brown won his first race for the California governor's seat and served 2 terms from 1975 to 1983. As governor, his style was decidedly unconventional. He declined to use the state-supplied limousine or to live in the governor's mansion. Brown instead rented a small room and slept on a mattress on the floor. Many of his policies defied the labels liberal or conservative. Brown was known as thoughtful, even aloof, but became a passionate voice for the growing environmental movement.
If the Clean Air Act is gutted and the Reagan administration goes ahead with the offshore drilling, we're going to really choke on the resulting air pollution.
Brown's lifestyle, his interest in the environment and space-age technology, led some critics to dub him Governor Moonbeam.
I anticipate a tough campaign. I'm running as an underdog.
Brown tried and failed to get the Democratic presidential nomination in 1976 and in 1980. After an unsuccessful run for the Senate from California in 1982, he took a long sabbatical from politics, studying Zen Buddhism in Japan and working with Mother Teresa in India. But by 1989, Brown was head of the California Democratic Party and reportedly mulling over another Senate run in 1992. Instead, the 53-year-old Brown is set on a third quest for the White House at a time when voter dissatisfaction with the political status quo is high and rising. Political analysts say the times may be just right for the fiery anti-establishment message of Jerry Brown.
I spoke with Governor Brown here in New York late this afternoon. Governor, thank you for being with us. You've run for president 2 times before, didn't make it. Why are you trying a 3rd time?
I'm trying a 3rd time, possibly following in the footsteps of my predecessor, Ronald Reagan, who tried a 3rd time and was successful. But more to the point, because I came back after 7 years away from politics, I was shocked by the depth of paralysis and corruption and distance from the people of California and from the people of America. And I believe that I can be a catalyst for change to restore the vitality to my own party and give the voters of this country a real choice.
What do you mean when you say things are corrupt, that there's something wrong with the system?
What I'm saying is that politicians have to spend inordinate amounts of time raising money, talking to a fraction of the American people in order to get the resources to buy the TV ads, to pay the highly professional consultants to communicate with a shrinking minority of Americans who still vote. And I believe this democratic process is declining almost in tandem with our economy and with our social structure. And that's what I want to provide, some truth, some opening, and what I call a second American Revolution.
But when you talk about corruption in the system and the amount of money that has to be raised, wasn't it that way when you ran for governor
when I ran for governor,
in the 1970s?
When I ran for governor, it was about $2 million, less than $2 million to run a campaign. And in the year, my first year, we never even went to a fundraiser. We did the business of the people, of government. Now, the day you're sworn in, that moment, your first official act is to have a breakfast fundraiser. In California, it takes $18 million to run for the U.S. Senate. Now, the everyday American is not giving you that money. It is a narrow fraction, the top 1%, or paid lobbyists whose job is to advance an interest less than the interest of the American people. And I'm not saying these people are evil. I was in it. I'm just as much a part of it. But what I'm saying is it's reached a point where we have to change it. The paralysis, the gridlock, the cynicism, the anger is there, and I believe, based on my experience and my understanding, that I can be a vehicle, a means for change, for people making that choice. They want to change it. And that's why I limit my contributions to $100, because that can't work unless tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people claim this campaign as their own. And as they make it their own, it will truly then create something different. It'll cut the umbilical cord to a process that no longer works.
You talk about this, and yet up until just a few months ago, you were chairman of the Democratic Party in California, our biggest state population-wise. You were involved in this very sort of fundraising that you're now railing
I was very much involved in it, and of course it was involved to support a party. And most of these interest groups don't even want to give to a party. And making the calls for the party, they often say, I want to give directly to the candidate. I want them to know where the money's coming from. And just day after day of doing this, and after I did it, and this is what really got to me, Dianne Feinstein lost. The party raised millions of dollars. She raised $20 million. And the conclusion of all the people around her was she didn't have enough money. They wanted more. And at that point, something snapped. I just said, this is crazy. We must change it now. And that's when I began to say, I don't want to be a chairman of this party. I want to go out and be a candidate and offer a restoration of the real spirit that this party was founded on 200 years ago.
Why are you running as a Democrat? Because when you announced, you said there's really only one party, and that's the incumbents, the Republicans and the Democrats in Washington.
Yeah, they've merged into a Washington party. That's true.
Why are you running as a Democrat?
Because I am a Democrat. My father was a Democrat. My sister is an elected Democrat. This is our party. It has been removed from us by an evolution of dependency on special interest groups and this enormous, it's not even tens of millions, it's hundreds of millions. And I believe it can be changed with a president and a Congress who will require free television, franking privileges, and an arena for public discourse that allows candidates to talk to the people without becoming beggars and prostitutes. And that's what the system now forces them to be.
You're talking about these ideas now, and yet, as you well know, many people look at Jerry Brown and they see someone who's unconventional, who's unpredictable, even eccentric, someone who...
No, when you say eccentric, what would you mean by that? Is that not living in the mansion? Is that not taking a pay raise?
Sleeping on a mattress in an apartment when you were governor
paying my own rent?
California.
It's a lot better than skipping out on tabs for food, bouncing checks like these people in Washington are, in utter contempt for the people who sent them there.
Someone who went off to study Zen Buddhism
yes,
for
and I
several
studied
years?
Zen Buddhism in the Japanese culture, which is our #1 economic adversary. And where I was studying it, there were 2 admirals in the Japanese Navy. I understand the culture of Japan, the mindset, and nothing would qualify me more for the trade battles that loom ahead for this country.
Why did you do that, and what did you learn from it?
Well, what I learned is that my own Catholic tradition is even more true than I could experience, and that all these traditions and world religions at their base have obviously a common theme, because it's touching the ultimate reality. And Buddhism, which is a powerful religion based on compassion, Christianity based on love, those, you sense that sometimes you have to see different language, different tradition to understand your own tradition. And I also am very interested in the world, in people in different countries. And I believe that is another qualification. Unlike George Bush, who rides around in luxury on Air Force One, I've seen ordinary people in Calcutta, in
You work with Mother Teresa in India.
And I've been all over the world. I've seen the way regular people live. And that is very important for a person who's going to lead this country. Because we're getting very separated from the people of other nations, and the world is getting much smaller, and I think that's another asset, not an eccentricity, not something, I don't think it's wrong to know other people. And just because the Japanese are different, or the Chinese, or the Indians, we ought to go over there and share some of their culture and their tradition, and yes, understand some of their religion.
But you, of course, don't deny there's an unconventionality about Jerry Brown, about Jerry Brown's approach, the nickname Governor Moonbeam?
You could say it that way, and maybe it's because I have had special gift. I've had time, I've had resources, I've had an education. I had the opportunity to study under the Jesuits for 8 years, and I want to give some of that back. And I want to, it's not ordinary. I didn't work in a factory. I didn't have to come out of poverty. My father was governor of California. I had these benefits. But they also gave me a deep understanding of the American political system. And I believe I can make a contribution for all the people, even learning from my mistakes. And I've met a lot of them. I have my flaws. I don't in any way disavow that.
You said, in fact, in a letter you wrote to your supporters last month that you, as you look back in your political career, you saw some things you would do differently. You recognized mistakes you wished you'd avoided. Like what?
Well, probably the number one mistake that I made, I didn't restore the vitality to the party in California to go out among people and build the kind of constituency that could carry policies through. Government today, even if you win, the pattern of power, the pressure of lobbying is such that if you don't build almost a movement behind you, there's nothing you can do when you're elected. Very little. It's very marginal. And I think the level of change needed requires a cause, requires a mobilization of the American people beyond anything we've seen since perhaps the Depression. And that's really what I'm inviting people to join. Another candidate won't solve our problems. The people themselves have to get involved. They have to take over the political process, or they'll never get their government back.
Reporters who've covered you for a long time point out how you've changed your mind on a number of issues that you now espouse. For example, you talk about term limits. Yeah. You're for them.
I've never changed my mind on term limits. That's not true. That was written in the New York Times. It just wasn't true.
I saw it in several different newspaper articles that as chairman of the state party, you were opposed to term limits in California.
That's not true. I was asked to sign a slate mailer opposing term limits, and I refused. I wouldn't do that. The party did oppose term limits because it was the agent of the incumbents. And that's where I really saw this thing. The Democratic Party has been taken over by the career politicians who are just its candidates. And the members ought to be the ones who dictate the future of this party and this country.
All right, what about limiting your contributions to $100? Last year in California, you opposed a lid on contributions to state campaigns.
To the party, not to candidates. Because
Isn't there an inconsistency?
No, because parties are an institution. They're a beautiful idea. They originally were to have a platform, to pick candidates who support the platform, then to get people to vote for those candidates, and then the most important thing of all, hold them accountable. And I think parties need to be built up. But what we're seeing is candidates, totally without reference to any platform, can buy their way into office, do chores for powerful people, and even unpowerful people, and create popularity totally separate from an agenda, from principle, from anything anyone can hold them accountable to. This political process is deteriorating, not just because of the money, but because there's no essential choice. I mean, even on that Thomas hearing, where were the Democrats? They didn't push this guy on environmental law, on labor law, on class action, on civil liberties, all the things that this party is supposed to stand for. They're scared. They're afraid of Bush.
What do you say then, finally, to those who say, okay, Jerry Brown has got some interesting, even some intriguing ideas, but he's very idealistic. All these things that he's talking about sound great, but the fact that he's limiting his contributions to $100, the fact that he's going about it in an unconventional way, the fact that he's attacking, in many respects, his own party, the party that he's seeking the nomination of, means he's going to have a very difficult time. You said yourself when you announced earlier this week, this is not just a campaign, it's a cause, or maybe you said it not.
Yeah, it is a cause. Because if I didn't limit my contributions to $100, there would be no way to distinguish me from all the other candidates. I would be embedded in the very system that I want to change. So I'm embarking upon a path that cannot succeed unless hundreds of thousands of people take it as their own. That's what I want to do. And when I criticize my own party leadership, I'm not doing it to weaken the party. I'm doing it to restore it. I don't like the fact that it was the Democratic Party that is supporting aid to El Salvador. I don't like the fact that they're confirming Gates for the CIA, that they confirmed Thomas, that they made Anita Hill, in effect, the aggressor instead of an innocent citizen, bringing information. I don't like them to just be there so ineffectively. And I don't like the fact that they get together with the Republicans and create a midnight pay raise to put themselves in a pay bracket higher than 99% of the American people, and then they agree together never to talk about it in a censorship of legitimate debate. That's what needs to be changed. And I found out as California chairman of the party, people are leaving the party. And somebody has to change it around, and we're not going to change it around by saying our side is not at fault. It's at fault, and so is George Bush. He is culpable, and we'll have a lot to say about him, but we have to clean up our own house first.
Governor Jerry Brown, we thank you for being with us.
Thanks.
Finally tonight, some words about democracy from our essayist Roger Rosenblatt, editor-at-large of Life magazine.
After watching the Soviet Union shake, rattle, and nearly roll away, you come to the odd conclusion that democracy may be the most stable form of government around. The conclusion is odd because those of us who defend democracy are always apologizing for its fragility. Behold the glorious chaos, we say. The wrangles over the limits of free speech. The shouting matches over issues of principle. The wars between the classes and the races. Even after the disgraceful performance of the Senate committee in the Clarence Thomas hearings, we look relatively strong. Of such turmoil, we say, democracy is made, as if acknowledging at the same time that self-government is a sort of historical weirdness, a comb and tissue paper instrument that at any moment could fall from our hands and be swept downriver. Whereas monarchies and dictatorships have always been praised for being solid as Gibraltar. The beauty of tyrannical forms of government is that you don't have messy protests and demonstrations, with the rabble spouting off or re-choosing their leaders whenever they feel injured. Mussolini made the trains run on time. Hitler made the trains to Auschwitz run on time. The lesson of Claude Lanzmann's documentary film Shoah was that the Holocaust was a demonstration of order and efficiency, a bureaucratic tour de force. Let's hear it for the eternal empires, the Greeks, the Romans, the Habsburgs, the Hohenzollerns, the Spanish, the British, the French, the Japanese, and the Germans, and of course the Soviets. Remember the Soviet Empire? Sure you do. It was here a minute ago. So here is a mystery for us. While the autocracies fell or were falling apart, the so-called chaotic democracies have, for the most part, lingered on. Either we were kidding all along about the fragility of democracy, or there is, in this chaotic form of government, a different kind of strength. Democracies are constructed like expansion bridges or skyscrapers. A considerable amount of sway is built into the structure. Look at the Bill of Rights, whose anniversary is about to be celebrated in December. The basic text of the Constitution was as stout and stable as a Georgian mansion. Then, all of a sudden, The founders decided that an unwieldy, potentially explosive Bill of Rights had to be added to the main house, like a crazy wing, because, in defiance of nature, the element of imbalance created a greater balance. We were more secure for being insecure. Appearances are certainly deceiving. Think of May Day after May Day in Moscow, and tank upon tank rolling beside Lenin's impregnable tomb. Now they're talking of moving the tomb. Shelley made a poem of such transitory power. Looking upon the crumbling, decaying statue of the Emperor Ozymandias, the poet read the words, "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." Meanwhile, this palsied republic of ours keeps hobbling along, its infrastructure requiring constant attention, its foundations under siege every hour of the day. I suppose it's better that we lament how fragile the thing is when it is in fact pretty durable, than were we to boast of our democratic mightiness only to find ourselves one day as flat on our back as the Soviets. On we go. I think of Langston Hughes' common man character, Simple, who was known to say, "I've been laid off, fired, and not rehired. Jim Crowed, segregated, insulted, eliminated, locked in, locked out, locked up, left holding the bag, and denied relief. But I'm still here." We are still here. I'm Roger Rosenblatt.
Again, the main stories of this Wednesday. Cambodia's warring factions signed a peace treaty ending 13 years of civil war. Secretary of State Baker said the U.S. is ready to open talks with Vietnam on normalizing relations. And Clarence Thomas was officially sworn in as a Supreme Court justice. Good night, Jim.
Good night, Judy. We'll see you tomorrow night with a look at President Bush's plan to reform the Senate confirmation process. I'm Jim Lehrer. Thank you and good night.
Funding for the NewsHour has been provided by PepsiCo. Every day we enjoy people being cold to us, cutting us up, getting fresh with us, tearing into us, and calling us chicken. In fact, the more people do it, the happier we are. PepsiCo. And by AT&T. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And by the financial support of viewers like you. Video cassettes of the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour are available from PBS Video. Call 1-800-328-PBS-1. This is PBS.
Once they were lost.
So what did drugs do for you?
It made it okay to be black. Angry and out of control.
That's how much anger I had inside of me for this dude. I'm gonna kill him.
Today they struggle to rebuild their lives. Only this time they're not alone. Now they have each other.
We gotta get past that anger, that resentment.
Bill Moyers joins a group of men fighting to overcome addiction on Circle of Recovery. Don't miss this powerful look at the battle to live without drugs. Wednesday.
Funding for this evening's programming has been provided by a grant from Entech, an Oregon company manufacturing high-technology microporous sheets and fibers.